The Democrats have apparently voted to condemn the Democrats, their own history. Finally, they agree with the rest of us. The Democrat-controlled House of Representatives on Tuesday voted to remove the busts and statues of prominent Confederate figures, including Robert E. Lee, from the halls of Congress. You put them there. What do you want? I think it was Republicans putting up these statues, is it? The bill, titled H.R. 3005, passed the House bipartisan with a bipartisan vote, with all the Democrats supporting the legislation alongside 67 Republicans. So all the Democrats are like, yeah, we were terrible. Yes, you were. Under the bill, the Joint Committee on the Library would be instructed to replace the busts of figures such as Confederate Supreme Court Judge Roger Brooke Taney from the old Supreme Court chamber of the United States Capitol. Additionally, a number of statues in public areas would be removed, along with all the statues in the Capitol building of individuals who served the Confederacy during the American Civil War of 1861 to 1865. How do you feel about that?
I think there might be a unique perspective on this because I have a strange opinion about statues, which is that the statues, no matter how horrible, if part of your civilization put them up, they should remain, if for no other reason than remind yourself of what your civilization did. So, for example, the most extreme would probably be, Nazi statues in Germany. I have to come down on the side of course, Nazism bad, but they should remain. And I got this perspective by going to Moscow and talking with the conservative Russians about Lenin's tomb. And on the subway, you have the Soviet hammer and sickle everywhere. And the conservatives, people who don't like Putin, wanted to get rid of all of them.
Yeah.
And I was just found myself being like, no, I'm sorry.
Because you're such a Russian asset.
There is something really valuable about the fact that you have all this stuff there, and in 100, 200 years, no one's going to know what any of the hell this stuff to do with anything, except historical nerds. And it is valuable to keep it there. And the same goes for the Confederates, same goes for the warring tribes of the Huns or whatever.
This is why conservatives lose everything. So would you like to take down the hammer and sickle? No, I'm a conservative.
No, I would like to keep it there, if for no other reason than to remind people. Because it's the thing as well, like let's say if you had a society that was taken over by communists that killed millions of people, and it's long since gone, the modern generation have completely no idea what you're talking about. If I can point to it and be like, look...
You'd surely put up memorials for the victims of communism.
You could do that as well.
I would do that, definitely do that as well.
Yeah.
But, in this particular case, I actually don't mind the idea, because I find it weird that, so you fought a civil war and the losing side have statues everywhere? Why would they have that?
So my understanding is this largely took place after the Civil War, in which Southern Democrats wanted to put them all up. And they did.
And now the Northern Democrats are like, actually, that looks bad, doesn't it?
It gets a bit difficult for my position when we're talking about the halls of power, buildings and whatnot. But generally speaking, I'm very, even when it's Confederates, Nazis, and communists, I'm very much I'm not sure how I feel about taking this down.
I think that there is a way of handling
Should
it.
have said Democrats, Nazis, and communists.
Yes, you should, but you repeat yourself. I think there's a way of handling this that isn't just the sort of vitriolic rage that we see from the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm actually, with the Colston statue over here, they fished the statue out of the river and went and put it in a museum. That seems fine to me. That's a fine compromise. Because on one hand, sure, if you view this thing as a statue venerating slavery or, slavery with the Confederacy, then I can see the argument that you don't want to have these statues in the public square. But then there is also the argument that they're a part of your history. You don't want to just blow them up like you're a part of ISIS, right? So I actually think that moving them to museums...
They're relics.
They're relics.
For good or evil, they are a relic.
Exactly. And moving them to a museum actually feels like an appropriate thing to do. It's like, yeah, okay, we don't want that being venerated in public because, of course, Confederacy. But we also don't want to just pretend like these things didn't happen or this isn't things that we had to learn lessons from. And so I think, and as a historical relic, I think putting them in museums is actually an appropriate thing to do.
As a last resort, I will agree, especially
as a compromise.
Last resort. This is not the position I want to go to.
Well, they're just tearing them down. They'll probably have a bonfire.
Yeah, they're destroying things, destroying relics, evil or good relics is horrible. But the museum thing is a great solution, if for no other reason than just, anyone who lives anywhere. You go to small towns and whatnot. I don't know if you've ever gone down to a local town museum and you spoke to the people who run it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is being from Amesbury, there's a small museum there about Stonehenge. And all of the stuff gets nicked and sent to the bigger museums.
Oh, no.
And the local people are really mad about it who run the local museum. And they're just so if it's a local area as well, it's great for the local museum to have some more stuff that they can have instead of just being nicked and sold off to Washington or whatever.
Yeah. So we got to hear from a California Democrat called Karen Bass about this, who noted the People's House can never be truly for the people if it is lined with tributes to those who fought to continue the enslavement of black people in this country. I mean, I can't say no to that. That's a pretty good point. It does seem weird that if you're like, yeah, we had racial slavery. It'd be like if the Spartans and the Helots decided, right, okay, we're going to be equal now, and they've got all these Spartan kings who have, put up statues because they conquered the Helots. I can see why the Helots would have an objection, right? So I can see why. I think it's a legitimate objection. I know that, being a bit soft and wishy-washy there, but I think it is.
It's again the whole thing of like, being there and looking at Lenin's tomb. It's like, of course, yeah. Awful guy beyond pale. Stalin behind him in the wall.
Again, put it in a museum, because the political buildings are the sort of living politics of the country as well.
It depends on the thing as well. With statues, it's quite easy to move to a museum. The dead man and his remains, it's more difficult. Like,
sure.
The place in which they are for Lenin's tomb makes it unique. So,
I haven't seen where.
Well,
it's
a bad example for me. I should have been using just a Stalin statue somewhere.
The Colston statue, in fact, is fine.
Yeah, so a Stalin statue in Stalingrad. I mean, take that to a museum.
Yeah,
exactly. Shouldn't be too much of a problem.
Exactly. Well, no problem there. But my ancestors built this building. Imagine how they would feel more than 100 years after slavery was abolished in this country, that we still pay homage to the very people who betrayed this country in order to keep my ancestors enslaved. Democrats. I don't think the Republicans are paying homage to them. Don't know why I have to say that. One of the main targets of legislation, Supreme Court Justice Taney, for instance, penned the 1857 Dred Scott decision that ruled that black Americans did not qualify for American citizenship. So, I mean, I don't think they really need to have his bust up there.
He's a Supreme Court justice.
Sure.
Like, that is an achievement. He can do bad things in his time.
And did.
But the reason he got the statue is not presumably because we're like based, black people aren't people, but rather because of his Supreme Court justice role.
Probably, but I can see the rationale for taking it down.
Yeah, send that to a museum. Yeah.
Again, send it to a museum. During a lengthy speech, the bill's primary sponsor and House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer defended the legislation and said Justice Taney represented the worst of American injustice and racism.
Which party?
Left wing injustice and racism. More things change, eh? Hoyer was echoed by fellow Maryland Democrat Jamie Raskin. Just
that's snake.
The history of our party. Yes, it's terrible. Just throw it out. He accused Taney of transforming the Constitution into a white man's compact. He disgraced the Supreme Court. Yeah, the Democrats. They're not good. Agreed. The bill faced Republican opposition, with Representative Mo Brooks of Alabama, condemning the Confederate statue removal effort as an infringement on states' rights.
What?
You seem to have reversed the argument somewhat here. Currently, each state in the US is allowed to honor two icons in the Capitol's Statuary Hall, a decision given to the state's officials. And of course, this is them being seen as a run-in of Democrats' cancel culture of intolerance and defending his state statue of Confederacy cavalry Joseph Wheeler, who would become a US general. So basically, they're saying, well, look, we get to choose these. These aren't your choices. And because this is our heritage, this is our thing, even though we vote Republican now and these people are Democrats and you're Democrats and you want to tear these things down, we want to keep them because they're ours and not yours. I mean, I don't disagree in principle, but I think there is a kind of practical thing here. Is like, is this the hill you want to die on?
Well, it's a similar thing in Russia. It's like, I'm not not me, but the people there will be like, I'm not a communist, but I still want these statues around because I want to remember what happened.
Sure. Again, this is why I think the museum solution is the best solution.
Sometimes the location is important.
Yes.
These things are difficult.
Yeah, especially in the particular case of the United States. Speaking at the House hearing on Tuesday, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy affirmed his backing for the legislation, but appeared to criticize the Democrats, noting that every figure marked for removal was a Democrat. What's interesting is that statues that need to be removed are sent here to the Capitol by states that are majority controlled by Democrats and sent to a House that was majority controlled by Democrats. Yeah, at some point the Democrats are going to have to admit that they're the ones that are the problem, really, aren't they? They're the ones who want to racialize politics in every era that they exist. There's a brief window in the late 90s where they didn't talk about race constantly, and that was nice. And then it just went straight back to race. But the bill hasn't been passed yet. It'll be debated in the Senate, but it'll probably go ahead, and then it'll get put on Biden's desk.
Unless the Dems are going to remember they're their guys.
Yeah, exactly. Unless the Dems start getting a bit of team spirit amongst themselves. But to be honest with you, Republicans, you may as well allow the Democrats to tear down their own history. Well, in fact, maybe he shouldn't. Because, I mean, they should be reminded of what they did.
No, yeah, that's a good conservative argument for the Republicans. Start banging the desk and be like, we will never forget the horrors
Of the Democratic Party,
This
yeah.
is like you trying to take down the Holocaust Museum or something, where it's like, you know, this is a perfect shrine to your intolerance. And the fact that you even got a statue of the guy after the fact. Like, after the Civil War, after you've lost, you went out of your way to put up statues to these wonderful Democrats.
Good point, isn't it? It is a bit like the Nazis, basically flying American flags. Everyone's saying, "Oh, we're going to take down every piece of evidence of the Nazi regime," because you know that's just
Because they
bad.
found out what we were up to.
Yeah, basically, and we're going to pretend that we are going to be the good guys.
Yeah, Auschwitz shouldn't be a museum. We should just give it back to the land or something like
Yeah,
that. It's
yeah,
like,
we should-
No,
we should
no.
bulldoze
I'm
it.
suspect of your reasons here. Actually, I think we just found a good argument.
I'm actually persuaded by that. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.